Hey guys, welcome back to the plant lab. That's pretty much what it is, right? All I do is experiment with plants here. Today, what I want to show you guys is my method of plant propagation and hydroponic growing using yarn as the medium. Now, nobody's doing this. I've been researching it because I've been doing this for a while, but I've been researching to see if there's anybody else that's doing this, and nobody else is doing it. I've seen similar things with microfiber, things like that, but what I'm doing is a little different. So I want to show you guys. Now, just so you're aware of why I'm doing this, or why I even started doing this in the first place, is because I've always had an issue with soil. I don't know if it's because every grow space that I've ever used doesn't have good circulation, or if my soil is constantly contaminated with fungus. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but soil growing has always been it's been a challenge for me. So I've always tried different methods with different methods of growing with different substrates. So I figured, you know what? Let me try using yarn and experimenting with yarn and see what I can do with that, because as long as it's synthetic and it's as long as it's inorganic, I could probably make it work. And sure enough, I have. Just to give you an example, this is a coleus that has been growing in yarn for quite some time. It was a cutting that was about maybe 3 inches tall, and it's been growing pretty well in here so far. This is a Creatia or Tradescantia pallida. This is the blue Sioux variety. A bunch of cuttings I put in here, and I just put some yarn at the bottom, like a yarn disc. And the plant has been rooting. I don't know if you could see the roots rooting into the yarn. It's been like this for a while. I forget to water it all the time, but the yarn holds enough moisture for a period of time that the plant doesn't really suffer until I get to watering it again. So another success story there. This is another coleus I've had in here. This one has grown a lot. This one was about 4 inches. Now it's about 8. So it's like doubled in size. This is the ball of just crocheted yarn. You can see the roots growing into the yarn at the bottom. I even have time release fertilizer in here because I was experimenting with time release fertilizer. Technically, I should be using hydroponic fertilizer. That's usually what I use. But I wanted to see, what would happen with time release fertilizer. Would I get burns? Would the nutrients not be available for the plants to uptake? Because it's, typically time release fertilizer is not used in hydroponic setups. Anyway, so far so good though. Here's another one. This is a little coleus in a vial with some yarn. Another coleus, African violet down there. I've done a lot of African violet propagation using yarn, and it's worked pretty well to this point. I also have, where is it? Oh, I don't know where I put it, but I have a snake plant, Sansevieria, that I put in yarn, and it rooted right into the yarn very, very well. So I'm going to show you exactly what I do. I take yarn. The cool thing about this too is that you can use different colored yarns, different textures. Again, make sure that it's nylon, it's synthetic, because we don't want fungus. That's the whole reason why I went into yarn. It's because I'm so sick and tired of having root rot and fungus problems and fungus gnats that drive me crazy. So you take your yarn and you're going to make a slip knot in the end and pull the yarn through the slip knot, through the loop. So it's loop pulling. Some people call it finger crochet. You can also use a crochet hook if you want. I find it a lot quicker and easier to just use my fingers because sometimes I just want to get it done. And the hook can be a little bit of a challenge unless you're really good at it. You can see how long I've made this one. So you make your chain of yarn. You get your cuttings. This is another coleus. This is Alabama Sunset. Has not been in the sun. As you can see, most of it is the lime green, but this is the color in the sun. And I also have some more yarn over here. This is white yarn that I did. This is already pre-soaked in just plain water. And I'll show you, when I put my cutting in there as well. But for now, what you do is you have your yarn. Typically, I would bring it to the sink and I would soak it in water. It absorbs water very quickly. But since I'm not going to bring it all the way to the sink, I figured I'd put some water in here, soak it really good. Make sure that you get most of the air pockets out. Depending on the yarn, sometimes you won't get all the air out. But, you know, as much of it as you can, just so that, you know, the water is soaked through all of the yarn. And this vessel's a little bit big for this because I don't have as much yarn in here, but that's okay because it does hold a lot of moisture. It's almost like rock wool. So that's what we're working with here. So now that I have soaked this, I'm going to drain off the excess water only because, put this into the light, you can see there, actually it's not even that bad. I'm going to leave that water. If it was like close to the top of where the yarn is, I would have drained it out, but it's not that bad. And then all you do is you take your cutting. I'm going to take off this other leaf because I don't want this cutting to suffer too much moisture loss, and I'm going to half these leaves like so. I'm doing this with one hand, so bear with me. Okay, like that. All right. So here's the new cutting. It's got one pair of leaves that are in the growing tip, and then the other two leaves are halved. So we're minimizing moisture loss. So now you take this, you just put it into the middle, and I like to kind of make it snug around with the yarn, and that's it. You can see it's not moving. It's nice and firm in there. And what's going to happen is as the water gets used up and evaporates or gets absorbed by the cutting, you will then top it off again, which is I would fill it all the way up with water and then drain all the water out, and the yarn will remain moist, nice and damp for this cutting. Another thing that I've realized is that the yarn, since it holds so much moisture, the moisture evaporates up, which creates a nice humid environment around the cutting. So another reason why, probably why, the propagation, at least using yarn for propagation, is so successful. Again, I have so much success with this. I recently did an experiment. I should have put it on video where I did cuttings in soil, half perlite, because that's typically what what you hear of that works really well for cuttings. And then I did cuttings in the yarn, and I think almost all of my cuttings in the soil with the perlite rotted. First they wilted, then they rotted, and it was very frustrating. But all of the yarn cuttings, coleus, I think this may have been one of them, I'm not sure. It was definitely this variety, maybe not this exact cutting. But all the ones in the yarn remained supple, they didn't wilt, and if they did wilt, it was minimal, and they're doing extremely well. And you can see from this one here, this was just a cutting off of the top of the plant, and it's got roots, it's got really nice leaf growth. Again, I'm just assuming that it would have more explosive growth if I used hydroponic nutrients on this. This was also an experiment with the time release, like I said before. But I'm telling you, this yarn option really works. I've actually saved some African violets that were severely rotted, the root rot. I didn't want to put them in perlite. I felt like it was just way too much moisture in there and not enough oxygen. I didn't want to put it just in water for water culture because I was too concerned I didn't get all of the rot out of it. But one thing that you can also do is treat the yarn with a 50-50 hydrogen peroxide and water, dilute the hydrogen peroxide with water, 50%, and then spray it down and let it just disinfect the yarn in case there's anything in that yarn. And these cuttings do extremely well. They do so much better than with soil. So here's the other one that we're going to do. And I'm going to take my cutting from a bunch of my coleus that are here. Let's do Dr. Woo. I'll take this cutting right here. Can you see where I am? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to take this cutting like this. And again, I'm doing this with one hand. So here we go. Beautiful coleus. I love Dr. Woo. I hate taking off these leaves because they're so pretty, but I really should. Instead of cutting them completely off, I'm just going to half them. They're just so pretty. I always hate defoliating my coleus for that one reason. I'll just take this off. Sorry about the camera. I know that it's all over the place, but I'm not very good at working with one hand. Oh, I just hit the camera too. All right, So here's the coleus cutting. There's the yarn that's already pre-moistened. I'm going to nestle it down in there. I want to get it nice and firm and bunch it up around it to make it nice and snug in there. And there we have it. There it is, ready to root and start a life of its own. So that's what I've been doing, and it's been incredibly successful. Like I said, I definitely recommend it if you are having trouble propagating or even just growing your plants. You want to try something different. You can do so many different things with yarn aside from just making the chains. If you get a thick enough yarn, as long as it's synthetic, you could just use the yarn to wrap it around the inside of the vessel and then put your cutting in there. I guess it's a little bit similar to that synthetic sphagnum moss that some people were using for a period of time for orchids. That one ended up becoming waterproof the longer you used it for some reason. This never happens with the yarn, at least the yarns that I've used, and I've tried a bunch of different types. So I say give it a go, and let me know how you do if you do experiment with that and try it out. And I will continue to grow these as they are in the yarn, and I will keep you guys updated just so you can see how beautiful they are. But I've already seen such great results. Again, hydroponic nutrients, I would definitely, once they get some roots and you see the roots growing and you see new growth at the terminal tip, then I would definitely start feeding with a grow or not a bloom booster, just like a grow or a vigor hydroponic nutrient. It's higher in nitrogen than phosphorus. You don't want too much phosphorus because you don't want your plants to go to flower, then go to seed. You want them to kind of leaf out and get nice and sturdy with the nitrogen and potassium. So definitely a grow formula for hydroponic nutrient, yarn of your choice as long as it is synthetic, and some cuttings. And then you're on your way. So let me know how it goes if you want to try it out. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. And thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead, share with your friends, anyone that likes to experiment with plants, because that is my favorite thing in life. So otherwise, I will see you in the next video.